come to your involvement with the panels. I only want very politely and gently to remind you to formulate your questions as precisely as you can. Resist the temptation to make mini speeches and indicate in the first round of questions your intention to ask a question by raising your hand. Any first, second, and third. So, Madam.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Cole, and I sit as the Constitutional Commission on both Women and Gender Equality Commission and the Rights and Child Commission. My question is directed to the former Attorney General, Honorable Mr. Nandlall. Why do you think that constitutional compliance trumps the need for constitutional reform? I thank you.
My question is this, Mr. Moderator, is for whose benefit is the need for any constitutional reform commission? Is it the benefit of the leadership of the PDP and the PNC, or is it for the benefit of the people of Guyana?
Martin Lopez, and my question is for Mr. Alexander. You mentioned things, and one of the things you spoke about was the need for a wide consultation, which I'm sure everyone will agree with. But you've been in this game for a long time. And you mentioned in your presentation, you alluded to a different role for the President and for the Prime Minister. My question is, would you like to expand on what sort of role you consider the President should play as against the Prime Minister? Because you seem to suggest something different to what is present here.
Thank you.
The question, as I recall it, is why do I say constitutional compliance trumps constitutional change? I thought I said that in the presentation.
Let me make it clear. My presentation was tiny. I am not opposed to constitutional change. I said that. The Constitution is dynamic, it's organic, it's alive, and it must always be reviewed for the purpose of change. But the change must be society driven. What we have now is we have a constitution. Vincent, in a very detailed manner, outlined what I support as once we reach the decision to change the process that should be adopted. That is not going to be a short-term process. It's detailed, it's elaborate, and it's all-embracing, and it extracts from the populace the fullest participation. I'm fully supportive of that. In the interregnum, that will take 5 years. And when we have a new constitution, it has to be obeyed. So why not start now? Try to obey the one that we have, and then consider changes that must come, inevitably. But we must not advocate change simply for change. Thank you.
The first question asked the question of constitutional reform for whom? I specifically, in my presentation, suggested that we should seek a national consensus on the need and purpose of constitutional reform, and that process should involve the stakeholders, that determination. I would think that a process like that would suggest if there's a need, and the need would be the need of the people and not necessarily the political parties. The second question has to do with the Prime Minister and the President. I'm suggesting a different presidential system to the one we presently have, where the President, for all intents and purposes, is a creature of the party. I would like to see a consensual President, one who is determined by Parliament using a qualified majority. So there must be consensus in Parliament about who the President is. I would like to see the president as representing the nation and make necessary the political process being an arbiter rather than being partisan. And that's generally what's guiding the idea.
Thank you.
So now we come to the second round of 3 questions, and we have one hand there, there's a hand over there, and this hand. So that will be the order.
I'd like to ask Mr. Chapman if he could advise us on the current passage of the Constitution Reform Bill. Thank you.
Good evening. Question to Minister Chapman. In his capacity as former Speaker, do you think at this stage of our development of Guyana that we need full-time parliamentarians and a full-time parliament? A question directed to Mr. Campbell. How your proposal will either increase voters' knowledge or facilitate democracy, even in spite of widespread ignorance?
Thank you. The 2 questions, one on the status of the Constitution Reform Commission bill. That bill was tabled in Parliament at the end of July, early August, and is now before the Constitution Review Committee. We are in parliamentary recess. We come out on a date after the 10th of October. So the first order of business will be that bill, which the committee will consider. And so far as the question, full-time parliament, part-time parliamentarians, it is an ongoing question. It has been with us since 1966. At one time, prior to 1966, we had a Senate. That too is up for discussion. Those of us who are practitioners in Parliament will agree that more time is needed. We, however, would need to match the facilities of Parliament with that, and that includes, of course, offices, etc. My own personal view is that chairs of committees, perhaps the standing committee, should be full-time, and a few other members of Parliament, but I don't believe that we are ready to go to full-time Parliament in terms of full-time parliamentarians. We don't meet as often. In no jurisdiction is there daily meetings of Parliament. In Trinidad, it's every Friday, and I believe they're the most vibrant. But certainly, whilst there is a lot of work, we are not yet at the stage that we require full-time parliamentarians. But there is quite a bit of writing and learning on the subject within the Caribbean.
I believe the widespread ignorance, and I don't like that word, but I understand a lack of participation, unwillingness to engage with things political, maybe, that you referred to, comes from the current system, because voters have no relationship currently with anybody. There's not a close relationship between the voter and any member of Parliament. Some argue that Guyana has a constituency system. It's broken up, I think, into 25 constituencies. But ask anybody in here who's the MP for the constituency, they would not be able to tell you. So I believe that if the change was made, and politicians are campaigning in specific geographical districts, they will have to reach out to those voters, and in that process, the voters also will become empowered, will also realize that they hold the fate of that politician in their hands, and we will get to the point where people are more involved in the political process.
I don't know that. So, could I have another show of 3 hands? 1, 2, and 3.
So, Moderator, my question is from Mr. Campbell. In his proposals, would he also consider, given our history of being a country of potential, we've been a country of great potential for the longest time, and that potential is not being realized because of governance. Would he propose that we have experts selected, hired by Parliament to head our various ministries, our various executive positions?
My question is for Ms. David on the panel as youth representative. What are your thoughts regarding confirmation hearings for senior officials in government, particularly within the context of young people not feeling that they have a voice
and not feeling that the process of appointment of many officials in government is very much open, and as a result, it seems that sometimes you see very senior individuals in these positions. And when I say senior, it's in terms of, well, I think you get what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Good evening. My question is for Mr. Chandarpal. Is there a provision in our constitution for maternity leave, and is it sufficient?
There is a provision for maternity leave. Actually, we're now talking about maternity leave as well. The Commission is exploring the option to see that it's possible to extend from 3 months to 6 months. But it doesn't depend on us. We can make recommendations to Parliament, and Parliament will have to decide on that. So hopefully by the time maybe the next baby is due, maybe paternity leave may be something that we can consider.
There was a previous question which addressed the issue of full-time parliamentarians. I kind of gather that you're alluding to a system where parliamentarians focus on the passage of laws, and we have an executive government similar maybe to the United States, where experts, to use your word, are drawn from our society. And my view is very personal here, so this is not a RISE view. I have no problem with that. However, what we did propose is a hybrid system so that you can have members of parliament, and that's why we said we should lift the limits on technocrats in the government that was entrenched in after the 1999 to 2001 constitutional process. Currently, in this coalition government, to the best of my knowledge, there is not a single technocrat. There are, and I know the honorable member next to me had issues with this, because there are about 4 people, the Minister of Citizenship, the junior minister in the Ministry of Human Services, who were appointed ministers under that same clause. But the argument was they were on the political list. So they are tainted politically. What you would like to see is people like yourself, perhaps with no political affiliation. Maybe you're an expert in civil engineering and you become the Minister of Public Infrastructure. I have absolutely no problem with it, but what we have proposed is a hybrid system that gives the President greater leeway to bring in experts into the government. We don't think there should be a cap on how many experts from civil society that he wants in the government.
All right, in answer to your question, let me just say that I would support any initiative that puts more power in the hands of the people and allow us to demand from our leaders the type of quality leadership that we deserve as guidance people. And so yes, I would fully support confirmation hearings for members of the National Assembly, especially if members of the public are allowed to pose questions or even being present at those hearings to ask the questions. So yes.
My question is to Shameza, but I think David, but I think it's a question that can be answered by everyone. This is an education forum. When we're talking about youth empowerment, is there any kind of advocacy going on about teaching constitution and constitutional rights and protections from an earlier age in school? Shouldn't that be part of the advocacy if we're talking about, giving youth more, empowering youth more when it comes to our constitution and leadership?
My question is to the Minister Trotman, or probably Mr. Alexander can answer it. In my understanding of the Constitution as we have it now, we don't have enough constitutional safeguard for our economic frames, especially in relation to oil, and especially in relation to oil under the surface of the ocean. Could somebody tell me something on this?
Everyone, I have a question, probably to Mr. Alexander or Mr. Campbell. How do you seek national involvement without changing the Constitution? And currently, as far as I understand, there is not a process to encourage such an involvement, and the lack of civic education in our school system that does not allow persons to really understand what the Constitution is, what's their rights to vote, and what's their right to be heard from the persons that are elected to represent us.
Thanks. I'm very happy for that question. This is a conversation that at the level of the Youth Council we've been having for some time, and we've been advocating for it for some time. I noticed today, it was either today or yesterday in the newspapers, that we're looking at curriculum reform, curriculum review in the education sector, and I would welcome that as an opportunity to introduce such initiatives. Youth Council will be doing some work directly on civic education in the coming months, and so it's definitely, we see the need to include civic education in the curriculum, or to introduce citizens to civic education at a younger age so that they're well informed, that they can make good decisions, and we can move away from the sort of culture we've embedded where, people make decisions based on tradition or, what others around them are doing, but not from a place where they themselves are informed enough to make that decision. And so we would like to change that. We think that civic education is definitely a driver we can use for that.
On the question of the curriculum, I think the time is opportune. If I'm not mistaken, the ministry has embarked on a curriculum reform process, and I think what the citizens need to do is to seize the opportunity to be a part of the process in terms of making contributions in a consultative way. A point has been made tonight, which I want to reiterate, without prejudicing my disposition towards the need for constitutional reform. There are a number of provisions of our Constitution which are not being adhered to or enforced. And that is why in my presentation I talked about ensuring that what's there is in fact adhered to. Article 13 of our Constitution, does provide for public participation, for stakeholder participation in decision making, sometimes observed in the breach. But we even have had in this country a court case, if I'm not mistaken, the Timal case, where the court overruled the position of the government because they had not embraced public consultation. That was a Messiah judgment some years ago.
Yes.
So there is a provision for it, but the question of the consciousness and awareness of the citizenry is a part of the problem in terms of the enforcement of the provisions of the Constitution.
I think the question from Malcolm about the mineral rights, the Constitution does grant the right to the state to own all mineral rights, including subsurface rights. However, some countries have been moving into their constitutions that those rights belong to the people as against the state. So it's something that the government is looking at. I must have quite persuaded by Mr. Campbell's argument about the provision of the sovereign.
Some aspects of it being entrenched insofar as how money is accrued, spent, and dispersed to the nation. So it is something that government is certainly interested in pursuing. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Hoppy, currently a law student at the Business High School. My question is directed to Mr. Campbell. In your address, you mentioned the need for many controversial constitutional areas of constitutional reform. And in the address by other panelists, namely Mr. Nandlall, among others, they would talk about constitutional conformity and execution of provisions within the Constitution as being a vital part of the constitutional reform process. So my question is, what do you believe is, what would you say about the current situation of the system of checks and balances that is enshrined in the Constitution, and further, what would you propose be changed?
My question is to Mr. Chandarpal. Having participated, I assume, I think, in the previous reform of the Commission, and also being an advocate for gender and women's rights, do you consider or do you think the time has come to raise the bar or the limited requirement for 1/3 of women in any body, political bodies? Do you think the time has come to at least say that we are 50%?
I wish to respond to the question that was asked with respect to gender equity. In terms of the 4 suggestions I've made, one referred to the Elections Law Amendment Act number 15 of 2000, in which it was stated it is in the Election Act, but we want now to elevate it to be in the Constitution. Additionally, we are already talking about the principle of gender parity. As a matter of fact, on International Women's Day, we raised the question of gender parity because we believe 13 years is a short time and we have to begin the discourse as of now. Yes, the Women and Gender Equality Commission will be making those recommendations. Thank you.
The question you asked was, the Honorable Anil Nandlall suggested that the issue is more of adhering to the current constitution. That is the bigger issue. And we have proposed also changes. And the answers that we both right. As an example, well, 2 things. I'll take the liberty of dealing one thing. He suggested it will take 5 years. Kenya, after their election violence in 2007, took just 2 years, a much bigger country, 45 million people, to get a transformational new constitution. However, to come back to your question, prior to Kenya, Guyana, in the 1999 to 2001 process, included in the constitution, or directed in the constitution, that legislation be passed regarding transfers from central government to local government. And reading Mr. Alexander's short bio here, I see that he was involved in the process of even drafting the legislation, which would have been the Fiscal Transfers Act. I don't remember the exact term, but right, as a pleasant thank you. To the best of my knowledge, and even though that has been drafted, it is not being implemented. There is non-compliance. So this is an example. So there are several areas of non-compliance. So Mr. Nandlall and Mr. Alexander, they're not wrong, and those need to be addressed. I believe, now to come back to the changes that we recommend, I think one, the Constitutional Court will help to move. So, for example, somebody from Region 10 might be able to file a case. So we need to remove all the complex rules concerning local standard. Somebody from Region 10 can file and say, listen, we're not getting the money we're supposed to get under, and again, the indigenous people can do the same. We're not getting the money we're supposed to get under the Fiscal Transfers Act. The Constitutional Court will hear that in a month, have a decision, and force compliance on ministers and other public office holders. The process of appointing constitutional office holders as well, by removing that, currently the president has a lot to do with that. If the Judicial Service Commission makes a recommendation on the judge, the president can sit on it. So by moving this process to Parliament, we're also moving, because I gather from your question that you go to a very wonderful school, Bishop. I gather that you're addressing the issue of separation of powers. So my final point on this is, I'm treading into dangerous territory with a number of lawyers that are here, but I will still bravely go ahead. The Westminster system never had clear separation of powers as it was originally envisaged, because in our executive sit numerous members who also sit in Parliament. So to the degree that we have argued that we should lift the cap on technocrat ministers, and in line with one of the questions that came up, whether we should just have pure experts, then we will start to get real separation of power. But so on the 3 things, the Constitutional Court, the parliamentary appointment process for constitutional office holders, and removing the limits on technocrats, I think we are moving towards that separation of powers that you're asking about. I hope I've answered the question. Thank you.
said that one of the changes that Rise would like to see is the establishment of a constitutional court. Well, it was under my watch, at the head of the judiciary, that a constitutional court was brought into being. But listening to you further, Mr. Campbell, I believe what you advocate is a change to the composition of the court. And that I understand, but the court is already established.
Thank you. The time limited me, and the court, and let me clarify this. There is a constitutional court. It's headed by the Chief Justice, sitting alone on all constitutional matters. And that has not always worked. And there have been various claims about that, the operation of that court. So yes, you're absolutely right. What I'm advocating is a movement from a single, the Chief Justice sitting alone on constitutional matters, to a panel of 5 where 3 is a court. So it is a change. Thank you. That's fine.
I would hope, as an addendum to my intervention, to have a private conversation in the way the Constitution establishes the separation of powers between the 3 branches.
I look forward to that.
Yes. I believe that I've come to the end of my road. You have been a wonderful audience. Your interventions were extremely meaningful, and I congratulate you, as well as I congratulate the panelists for their presentations.
Friends, let us give our moderator, Turkeyen Tain 9, a tremendous round of applause for the skill with which he conducted the deliberation. Perhaps we should seek to have the debate on constitutional reform hosted by the University of Guyana, given the civility that we saw here, and not necessarily in the halls of Parliament. Thank you very much, sir. We'll do 2 things and wrap up today's session. But first, I want to invite the very hard-working, dedicated, and committed staff in the Office of the Deputy Vice Chancellor for PACE to do a presentation, immediately after which we'll invite the Vice Chancellor of the University to have a photo opportunity with this esteemed and distinguished panel, so that this will become a permanent feature of the university's historiography. We will not miss that opportunity to add this to the renowned Caribbean reference library of the University of Guyana. I invite my colleagues from PACE to take care now.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the University Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dr. Professor Sulung Mohammed, and the PACE office, we would like to present a special token of our appreciation to our moderator and our presenters, who have contributed very comprehensively and passionately to a very important discussion that we all should be having as Guyanese. So, I'd like to invite my colleagues to join me as we present you with our special token.
Now, what was not said is that this bag is given so it can be returned full. Natural resources are everybody. Maybe we can all just come out and
Yeah. That's it? You want the other one?
He will not allow the Vice Chancellor to forget.
UNICEF, please. Symbolic.
We now have the
Conservation International. Representing Conservation International. We'll conserve the back.